when we have a break.
Okay, phones away, out of sight, off, turned off, no vibration. Okay, we don't want you walking out to go and take a phone call. We will give you a break. They can be reattached to your umbilical cord at about 10 to 5. So, since this presentation today is on note taking, we expect you to take notes. Sort of obvious, right? A quick announcement about Thursday. I think there are 6 of you who have been accepted into the Saruk Leadership Program. If you have, can I see? I think are you here? It's a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. You all got a notice as to when the bus is leaving, right? On Thursday. We'll leave from the front of the dorm at 5 o'clock. So at break time, we'd like you to be here in class until break, and then head over so that you can. The bus won't leave without you. So make sure that you're here for the first part of class on Thursday, and before you go down again. Yes. Sorry? Well, it's now going to leave at 5 o'clock, because I said so.
Oh. Okay.
No, I told them that we want the bus to leave at 5, so leave at 5, not at 5:45. So, any other questions? No, we're good. Okay. David, introduce our speaker.
I had such a good time with you guys, I came back to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Lawrence Wong is a professor of biochemistry here at Birmingham University. He's a man of 1 wife and 2 wonderful daughters, both of whom won the Legend Scholarship, which is a cash scholarship you may want to look into if you're in biology. And today he will be sharing with you effective note-taking and taking tests and exams. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lawrence Wong.
Okay, so I was asked, I think this summer, to do this. I actually did something very similar last year, but they decided to change the topic again. So I thought I was supposed to do it on Thursday. So last night I was just spending my time until about 1 o'clock, which I don't want you guys to do, getting this ready for today. So the first part is actually a little bit different than my talk last year. Anyways, let's just start off with a Bible text. The Bible text is in James 1:5. It says, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God and he'll give it to you. If you not rebuke you for asking. So isn't God great? You know, if you need wisdom, just ask for it and he'll give it to you without having second thoughts. Okay, we'll come back to this thought in a little bit. Okay? So I'm going to break down this lecture into several parts. Okay. The first part looks at effective note-taking. Can you guys all hear me from the back? No problems? Try to speak out louder. Okay. And looking at some key principles, some of the methods that may be out there for taking notes, and some of the techniques. And then what happens after the class? What you're supposed to do after taking notes. Okay. And the next section we'll be looking at preparing for exams, tests, and stuff like that. And also, what to do at exam day, okay, when you're taking tests and stuff like that. And I'm going to end up with a little bit with test anxiety too, okay? So let's just get into it. Okay, so I have some students in my class, and Boss B is one that graduated some years ago. And some years ago, during COVID times, he drew a picture of me. He was bored, so he was taking notes in his way. And he sent me this picture. So I really treasure that picture. He graduated in 2023. He's currently in his 2nd year at McMaster doing his MD. So he's a very smart kid, but he loves drawing. Okay? Now, there are 3 steps when you want to take effective notes. 3 things that you need to look for. First of all, involves that you take the notes in your own words. Okay? And we're going to come back to that concept in a bit. To be able to organize them too, because if you don't have some organization, you're going to have problems later on. Okay? And finally, after taking those notes, you need to be able to review and revise those notes. Sometimes just to add a little bit more detail, a little bit more understanding, and maybe correct some of the notes when it comes to it. Now, this involves some kind of structure, okay? A structure where you have to put the details down, a way to maybe visualize it, maybe. Some people are very visual, they like pictures and stuff like that. Maybe highlighting, okay, so some people like highlighting. Ability to process those notes, because when you're studying those notes, you need to be able to process and review it, and eventually summarize in your own words, because in a test, you have to reproduce that, right? Okay. Now, the key principles of taking notes is you don't have to write everything down. Be selective, right? The key terms, maybe, okay? Some people just write key terms and then they come back and fill out whatever they need to define those things, right? Concentrate on concepts rather than writing down everything, right? The concepts of your notes, right? Use your own words. It's very important to use your own notes because when you paraphrase the information, you are actually actively engaging in your notes. Okay? And this is something that's important. Don't be a passive note taker. Be an active note taker, right? And I noticed some of you are already doing that trick that I notice a lot of kids do. Take a picture. Okay? Now, is that a form of active note taking or is it passive? Active? Do you think it's active? Not so much. I don't think it's active. I think it's more passive, right? But I know you guys are that generation where you take your cell phone out and take a picture, right? Now, if you're more passive that way, then you have to, do the more of the review to be more active, right? So it's actually better to use pen and paper or a device like an iPad or something to actually write. Okay? Organize your notes. The best way to learn something is to have organized notes so that you can see headings, subheadings, so that facts fall under the right headings, for example. Okay? Now, the other thing that can help you in time management is to use abbreviations and symbols, okay? Especially in chemistry or whatever, symbols, physics, you can use your own symbols or abbreviations, but make sure you understand what you're writing down, right? So if you're writing an abbreviation, make sure it's something that you recognize and can get value out of. That saves a lot of time, right? Because if you can use abbreviations. Now the last part is actually to mark it for emphasis. And this is where you can use color to emphasize basically your notes that way. Okay? And that actually draws attention to important information too. Now, there are some methods out there, but I took it from two websites. One at the University of Lincoln in the United Kingdom, and the other one at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, which actually summarizes, they have a very nice webpage that looks at some of the methods that are often used in note-taking. Okay? Now, you notice in my presentation, the summary in the beginning, the outline, I have headings and then subheadings and things like that. Now, that's a form of note-taking called the outline method. Okay? So in the outline method, basically, you have major points, usually on the top, as headings, okay? And then supporting details as subtopics, subheadings, and then your information, right? So that's a form that we often see. Now, these have great advantages, especially when it comes to learning a very detailed topic, right? So some of you may have a chance to take my class. We are currently talking about DNA replication, right? Which is something that you guys are familiar with. You have polymerase, you have primers and stuff like that. You have all these things coming in together and how it works and stuff like that. In cell biology, you have a lot of details that way. So when it's detail-oriented, sometimes the outline method works really well because you are always organized with your subheadings, right? Some of the pros, it allows the notes to be neatly organized because of the headings and subheadings. It is simple to see a relationship between topics and subtopics too. Okay? And it's easy to turn points into study questions, okay? Now, one of the things about note-taking is that you want to be able to use that to study, right? And sometimes you might like to quiz yourself, and sometimes those points can be used to make a quiz question, okay? Now, what about some of the cons? Not ideal for formula-heavy subjects. So you're doing math, for example, it doesn't work with math, right? Math, sometimes you just have to work out things like that. And if this will not work too if the lecture is too fast. Okay? So if I start talking faster, it may not work for you. Okay? Okay, now another method that's very popular, which actually a lot of my students use, is something called the Cornell method. Okay? Now in the Cornell method, which some of you may know, you take a page and you divide it into 3 different regions. Okay? One region is your major note-taking area. One is a small column called a cues column, and then a summary section. Okay. Now, again, it doesn't have to be in this exact format, but it may be in your own format. It works too, right? And so basically, what happens is this allows you to then organize your notes in such a way that you have keywords that always jump out at you. Okay. Now, it's actually taken from Walter Pope that wrote How to Study in College. Okay. Now, effectively what you do is, in this note-taking area, you record the lecture as much as you can. Okay, so here's chemistry, right? Talking about solids, liquids, and gases, right? And you're gonna write out solids, what the properties are, and then all that stuff, right? And then, what you do then is, after your lecture, you're gonna go back to your notes, and then write the keywords on the left column, right? Those are your cues, okay? Those are the cues that will trigger your mind with regard to this information, right? So this is nice too, because what happens is if you are studying for a quiz or a test, you can take another sheet of paper and cover this side up, and then you can look at the keywords, and you should be able to repeat then what the information is on this side, right? Okay. So that's one way of doing it. And then the other thing that you want to do is you want to summarize this usually in maybe 1 or 2 sentences what this is all about. Okay. Okay. Now this method was used very successfully with my youngest daughter, where she would go to a lecture for medicine where it's pages and pages of notes in one lecture, 50 minutes or whatever, right? But she would take all she learned and reduce it to 1 page, into 1 page like that, and then she would have the keywords. And then she would summarize it, okay? And so she had a page for every lecture, every day, okay? Now, you guys all know in medicine, you have a lot of material, and you have 300 pages that you're tested on, but you might be only tested on the content of 1 page, right? So, the ability to be able to study everything, so she would then go back and study 1 page, the next page, and review it every day, allowed her to stay on top of the material, okay? Okay, so that's a famous Cornell method. So some of the pros of this, the notes are very neatly organized for that reason, right? And they are also summarized on the left with the cues, right? But it also allows you to review it, especially when you have a summary statement, right? This also allows you to pull out the major ideas from your notes, right? Those are on your left side, right? Your cues and the concepts, right? Now, this is sometimes called a do it right in the first place system, right? You do it right, you take notes right the first time, you don't have to do it again, okay? Now, this method also brings up something called the 5 R's of note-taking, which I'm going to look at in a couple of slides. Now, are we okay so far? Any questions? No? Okay, I'm going to test you, okay? What are some of the cons of this technique? Part of the problem is you need to prepare those pages, right? But really, in real life, you don't really need to prepare those pages. You just need to know that the left side is your keywords, and then you have the notes here, and then the bottom is always the summary, okay? It's nice to have those lines, but you don't really need these lines, okay? And so that could be overcome, okay? The other thing too is the review of, requires some time for review and summarizing key concepts. So this forces you actually, it's a good thing to go back to your notes and do it. Okay? But if you don't have time, this could be a detriment too, okay? Because you have to come back and do Okay, so what the 5 R's of note taking? You record your notes, okay, that's the first thing you do, okay, in the main column, okay. You need to write legibly, right? I know I'm the worst handwriter person in the world, and so I have to use it on the iPad because I can erase them. You can reduce your information this way too, by putting in the Q column, right? When you're reviewing, you're kind of reciting it. You're looking at what you write on the Q side, okay, and then kind of say, what does it mean on the note side, okay, which is great. You are able to reflect, okay. Anytime you can reflect in the notes, it sinks in, right? The more time to look at the notes, the more it sinks in, right? And then the last part is to review it. And I would say spend about 10 minutes every day just reviewing the notes from the week, last week, or whatever. The more you review, the better it is. Yeah.
I'm sorry, please go back to the previous slide.
Okay. I'm too fast for you?
Yes,
Way too fast? Okay. Sorry, I need to slow down a little bit.
Are you writing everything?
What did you say, guys? So you guys learned to summarize, eh? You learned to take those.
Oh, that's what he's doing. Teaching us to summarize.
I'm going to tell you a secret later. Is that okay, people? Remember, don't take everything. All you need to do is to maybe write these things out. The first bullet list, right? Okay. Okay, let's move on. Okay. Now, I mentioned that some people are very visual, right? Okay? They're very visual, so they like to draw, right? And this is something called mind mapping. Mind mapping is when you have a central theme or central idea, and then you start working away from that central idea, right? Dr. McDowell probably enjoys this mind mapping kind of thing, right? He's an artist, right? And then usually what happens is draw lines from the main central idea to the related items so that you kind of see the relationships that way. So when you're looking for relationships, that's really good, right? So maybe here's an example of maybe a mind map, right? You know, you're talking about the digestive system, you have a box for the mouth, and it goes to the esophagus. You see the connection, right, in your notes, right? This is not a typical mind map, but because there's a nice picture, you know, something that's going on, right? But usually what happens is this is what happens, right? You have the main topic, you have some subtopics or some ideas, so you can write down some of these things, right? Now, for some people, this is a mess, okay? I am actually I like to be more organized, so the outline method works really well for me, okay? So I like to stick to that, okay? Others may use a different method, right? Now, these methods have pros and cons, all of them have pros and cons. For the mind mapping method, basically the pro is everything is visual. Your lecture is visual, right? You don't really have to think. You can see the connections quite nicely. There's the lines, you can put arrows and stuff like that. These are flow charts, right? And flow charts allow you to analyze and also resolve complex problems, right? If you're following a sequence, you can use arrows and stuff like that. And the main points, when it's done, can then be used as to create flashcards, okay? That you can use to study. And then you can take those flashcards and then put them on the table and kind of map them together again. And that's another way of reviewing it, right? Okay? So some people like this, right? Now, the others on the back side, the con side, is time consuming. Sometimes, you know, because you run out of space, maybe, oh, the teacher is talking more about this, and you run out of space, right? But now you have iPads that will allow you to create another page and stuff like that. And I know some of you use Evernote. Do you guys use Evernote for taking notes? It's an app which allows you to put pictures and notes and everything together. That's kind of useful if you use Evernote to use this form of taking notes. Okay. Sometimes it may lack sufficient details or complex. So I'm talking about DNA replication that has a long list of things. It might not work too well, right? Okay. And less suitable for linear or sequential information, right? And it also can become messy and overwhelming if you don't structure it well the first time, right? Okay. But again, if you guys use an iPad now or a Rocket Book or whatever to quite easy to erase now, so you can make a mistake and always go back and erase it, right? Okay, so after taking the notes, those are the three methods I think that are very common out there. That's actually quite a few. If you Google note-taking methods, you'll find a lot. You need to find something that's useful for you, and that suits you, okay? I often tell my kids that are going to be successful in med school is that you learn to study here. You learn to study at Berman, right? And so you learn to take notes at Berman. You learn how to, do tests at Berman and stuff like that. Because once you get to med school, you don't have time for that, right? Okay, so this part is actually very important too. After taking the notes, you need to go back and review and revise. Okay, so sometimes you make a mistake, and you realize you make a mistake because you've been reading your textbook maybe. Your textbook says something different than your notes, right? So you need to go back and revise and review it. Okay? You may have to add details because you didn't have time to write things, right? You don't know you're going so quickly. You just have keywords and stuff like that. So you need to now add the details that are required, right? You need to summarize it. If you use the Cornell method, you will be summarizing at the bottom of the page, right? You capture the main ideas and the different concepts. You then also need to integrate this information, right? How does it relate to last week's work? We learned about this process in biology. How does it relate to the beginning of the semester and stuff like that? The more relationships you can build, the better it becomes, right? Okay? I'm going to give you an example, right? Some of you have fancy homes with a fancy room. You have a fancy room, a nice big room with a huge set of closets, right? And you have drawers, right? One drawer is for socks, one drawer is for underwear, one drawer is for t-shirts, one's for sweater and stuff like that, right? When you wake up in the morning, sometimes you're kind of groggy, but oftentimes you go to the right drawer. You pull the drawer, you know exactly where it is, right? That's repetition, right? So you've done it for many years, right? So the same thing with information. If you repeat that, you're going to learn it. You're going to keep it in your mind that everything is now autopilot, right? Okay, so that's how it works, right? Okay, is that okay so far? Note taking?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay, that's good. Now, we're going to move on to test exam preparation. Okay? This is the second part. Now, unfortunately, you have to have a quiz or test, an exam sometime or another in your life. It's actually a very important part of student life, right? But if you prepare and have confidence in taking this, then you will do well. Okay? So preparation is the key. Okay? Preparing for tests usually takes time. Okay? One thing that I want to stress is don't cram for it the night before. You're in high school, you might be able to do that, right? But as you go through the classes here, first year you might still be able to cram it the last 2 days before the exam, right? And you take a Dr. Wong's class, you need to start working 3 weeks ago, okay? So that's how we try to train you to prepare days or months in advance, right? Because most professional schools have exams once a month, and you have a lot of information, right? So preparing mentally, physically well in advance, right? Making sure you don't get sick and stuff like that, right? Good test taking skills can help make the difference between an A+ and a B, right? You guys remember that, right? Okay. And again, I took a lot of this information from a website, test taking tips, right? Okay. You guys all know Alexander Graham Bell, the father of the modern cell phone, right? He said the preparation is the key to success, right? And that's true. Prepare and use it to be successful, right? So, what is the first thing that you need to do to be successful? Take good notes, right? You get good notes, you're prepared for it, right? So you retain more knowledge by taking detailed notes. Taking notes helps you engage with the material. And that strategy is called active writing, right? So when you're writing down, you actively engage in your mind and your hand, and so that when you write it down for a test, that is the more times you build that neuronal connection, better it becomes, right? Okay? So try not to be passive. Don't take a picture and then. I often wonder what happens to those pictures. Do they go in the garbage bin? In the phone? Maybe, you know? I know sometimes I have to delete my pictures because I run a group like that on my phone, right? So sometimes that's not the best way to do it, right? If you notice a detail enough, you can read over them to study, or use them to make flashcards. Now, recently I noticed a lot of kids using something called Anki. Have you heard of Anki? No? It's fantastic if it's a multiple choice exam. A lot of professional schools use multiple choice exams. And so what it is, it's basically a flashcard kind of system. You have questions, and then the answer is the back. You know the flashcard how it works. You have a question, and then the answer is the back. So you look at the question part, and you answer it, you look at the answer. So Anki is kind of like that. So if you get it right, it doesn't ask you that same question again, but if you get it wrong, it puts it back into the pile again and asks you that question, right? So by using that question and answering those flashcards, basically, you learn the material, okay? Now, it takes a lot of time to do that, okay? So if you have time to do that, maybe that's a good way of doing it, right? But I'm not suggesting that's the only way of doing it, right? If you take good notes, you should be okay, okay? Now, another thing to note too is, especially the transition between high school and university, is that sometimes you don't have those good study habits. So try to cultivate them now so that you can use them later and rely on them, okay? First of all, find a comfortable place to study, right? You guys know where the library is, right? That's a fantastic building, lots of space to study, right? Okay. And sometimes you have to do it in a room, right? Where's your favorite spot in your room?
Bed, my bed.
Your bed. That's a problem. Washer? Yeah, washer is good too, sitting on the can. Sitting on the can, you get a hernia, but don't do that. Beds are the worst places to study, right?
I tried that.
It's comfortable, you tend to drift off and sleep, right? So find a comfortable desk and chair. Your dorm has a desk and a chair, right? I know some dorms are so tight with bikes or whatever that you don't have room and so you go to your bed, right? So try to find a good place. Good lighting. Sometimes your room doesn't have really good lighting, right? Free from distractions, right? The dorm is also not a good place because you have a roommate sometimes. And your roommate likes to play music or likes to play a game or whatever. That kind of distracts, right? So if you're a serious free man, go to the library, hide yourself, and study, okay? Turn off your phone. That's something you learned today, right? Okay? You know the phones are so important nowadays, right? Emergencies and stuff like that, but you know what? Some things can wait, okay? So if you need to check your phone, maybe turn it off for 55 minutes and then spend 5 minutes every hour checking your phone and then turn it off for another 55 minutes, right? Just put it on airplane mode, right? Because sometimes you just leaving your phone still notifies your watch, right? So review and notes daily. Okay, so that's one good study habit too, right? Study early and often. Okay, give yourself some time. Okay, make sure that you are ready for life surprises, right? Okay, a lot of times when you're studying for a big exam, you know when things happen, bad things happen. It's always just before a big test, right? Grandma passing away, right? Or something happening. You smash up your car, you have to call insurance. Okay, so try to plan ahead and give yourself a little time so that you can say, okay, I'm done studying, I'm going to sleep tonight. Okay, that's perfect, right? Cramming causes stress and anxiety, and it's not what you want. Spaced repetition, so it means that if you repeat studying notes over a few days, more will sink in, right? Okay? So that can only happen if you start much earlier, right? Start early and try to do that. Okay? So again, stress, don't cram. Cramming is highly counterproductive, right? So you want to get an A, don't cram, right? Spend time doing that. The other thing that a lot of students often will say is they study just the class notes, they get ready for the test, but they forget doing the homework. They say, oh, I don't really need to do homework, I can study. If there's homework to do, do it, because they usually help you to understand the concepts, right? They are study guides maybe, a teacher put out learning objectives. A lot of my students sometimes forget to look at the learning objectives, right? Because those are kind of hints from teachers that these are the important concepts, right? That you need to know in your chapters, right? Take a practice exam, right? Some teachers do give practice exams for helping you. Or if the teacher doesn't, make your own questions to test yourself, right? That's one way of doing it, okay? Now, another thing that often helps is forming a peer group, okay? A peer study group is basically a bunch of people coming together to study, okay? And that often helps each other out, help each other out. Now, if you want to get an A, okay, identify people that are smart, that are likely to get A's, right? Those are the peer groups you want to get into, right? So if you want to get a C, then you find the slouchers, or the D students or the C students, right? So really, you need to kind of select the group you get into, right? Keep the group kind of small. Don't have 50 people. Have enough that you can converse with each other, interact, so maybe 4 max, right? And you meet the group maybe sometimes once a week or something like that. Now, sometimes the problem is not knowing the material. So you need to make sure you learn the material first. And if you have some questions, you're going to go to your peer group and you're going to discuss that. Okay? And that interaction should help you. Okay, so make sure you learn it first. Don't go to your peer group and say, oh, I didn't study the material. You know what's going to happen, right? Your peers that study the material, they will know exactly what's happening. You are going to be completely lost, right? Okay, so just make sure you study the material first. Okay. Now, what are some of the benefits? You go to a peer group, you could have encouragers, okay, emotional support, and accountability partners, okay? I like the accountability partners. Making sure that you are doing your work, okay, so your friends are making sure. They could be a therapist or a tutor too, okay? So there are some advantages of that. Okay, I think we're supposed to take a break now.
5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, good nutrition also maintains good physical health and also wards of sickness. I often see this happening on campus just before around Christmas time, before final exam. Everyone gets sick. And that's because everyone is not eating well. Everyone is just trying to get work done and not sleeping well and stuff like that. So try to prioritize your health. Stay hydrated. Drink lots of water. It's very important. Okay. Other things to do: make sure you exercise. Some of you need to go take a run. Sometimes maybe engage in self-care. Okay. Your mental health, right? Some people enjoy playing games. Self-care. Some meditate. Some people read the Bible. Something like that. Or worship and spend time with God. Do that every day, and then you should be able to feel good about yourself. Okay. Now that is prior to taking an exam. So what we'll do now is look at what we actually have to do during the exam day. And for most people, test anxiety is the biggest problem for us during the tests, especially when it comes to final exams, right? And so here are some tips that can help us maybe overcome some of these anxious moments and also allow us to perform the best, right? Okay. Now, one of the things that I often say to my students is to arrive early to the test site. You guys all know that during the final exam week, most of us will be taking our final exam in the gym, right? Okay. That's not a normal spot to be at an exam, right? So make sure you get there on time. Okay, 10 minutes at least. Okay. Some people like to sit in their favorite chair. So get there early so you get your favorite chair, right? For example. So that you start relaxing and get ready for that exam, right? Choose the best seat you want, right? Once you get in your seat, start getting organized. You need a pencil, some erasers, maybe a calculator, for example, whatever. Mentally prepare yourself, also physically prepare yourself, right? Okay. When you're taking tests online, make sure your computer works. A lot of people go to tests and computer is dead or is not charged up, right? So make sure you make sure that technology is working properly. Now, I know some of you don't wear watches nowadays because you have a cell phone, but I would suggest you either wear a watch or have a way to tell the time, okay? Most classrooms have a clock. This one doesn't have one here, but has one in the back that's off a little bit. But in the exam hall in the gym, we have the big clocks up there, right? Okay? So if you like to have your own watch, make sure you have your own watch. This allows you to keep time, keep track of the pace that you need to go, right? Or if you are needing to see the watch, the clock, on the side, then maybe position yourself so you can see it clearly. Yeah. Yeah, usually they're let me put it this way. Yes or no? If you are always looking at your smartwatch, we know you're cheating, right? But if you're just looking up to look at the time, it's okay, right? I know you guys are pretty savvy. You put adults here and there. Right? We will get you. Okay, so pace yourself, give yourself time. Okay, once you get the test, okay, what do? Look at the instructions, right? Make sure you know the instructions, right? Sometimes it's a verbal instruction, sometimes it's written, so make sure you understand the instructions. Plan next, okay? And planning means that you look at the number of questions, right? Okay? Is the test 8 pages, 4 pages, 2 pages? How many questions? How many multiple choice? How many written essay questions and stuff like that, right? Kind of get that in your mind so that you kind of now plan your time, right? You guys in biology will have the option to take, or will have to take a class with Dr. O, and Dr. O will give an exam, and he would be famous for his 2-question test. Okay? 2 questions, but multiple parts for each question, and sometimes even to A, B, C to Q. Okay? So this pages might be 8. So make sure you know that, okay? Look at the pages. Make sure you know that there's 8 pages of questions, right, before you start doing it. Okay? And then the next thing is to mentally prepare yourself for the questions, right? If it's multiple choice, you can plan maybe a minute per question. If it's written, then you need to plan a little bit more time, right? Okay? Okay, answer the questions you know first. A lot of times you don't know every question, right? So answer the question you know first. Sometimes there's a list question where, like say a process or whatever, and you remember it, okay? But you said, okay, well I'm going to do it later, but quickly do maybe a brain dump. A brain dump is basically putting all the information down that you're going to use to answer that question, right? Especially, let's say, in an essay question. Do a quick outline, right? And then maybe come back to that when you have more time, right? If you have a problem with a question, skip it in the first pass, right? But always, when you're doing this, don't rush, you know, try to make sure that you have the pace, be mindful of the time all the time, keep an eye on the time, or something like that. And if you skip a question, you need to then eventually come back to it, okay? Okay, so you usually have a first pass, you know, where you do all the easy questions, right? And then you go back to the questions you skip, okay? Now, sometimes this really helps because what happens is when you start a test, sometimes your brain doesn't work very quickly, right? It's not going at full speed, right? But once you, in half an hour into the test, when you come back to that question you skip, oftentimes your brain is already working quite well, okay? So their brain is basically warmed up, and so you're able now maybe to answer. You know, the first time when you went to the first pass, you didn't understand that, but this time you see it, oh, so I know how to answer that, okay? And sometimes if there's a struggle, attempt to answer that, a lot of students sometimes leave the page blank. Don't do that, okay? Why? Because if it's an essay question or something, oftentimes you get partial credit for at least answering things that are needed, right? So you may not answer the full 100% of the question, but you're going to get some partial credit, right? And some people will just do stuff like that.
Aw.
Okay, try not to be silly.
They got marks.
Yeah. This is probably grade school, so
And
you
plus
guys are
two.
not in grade school. Right? Okay, so I mentioned that you know the test, you scan the test, you go through the first pass, the second pass. The other part that you need to know is the types of questions, right? You're going to attack a multiple choice question differently than an essay question, okay? So, in a multiple choice question, you think it's a lot easier. In fact, sometimes multiple choice questions are more difficult,
Yeah.
okay? Why is a multiple choice question seems easy? Because all the answers are there, right? You just need to pick the right one, okay? So, if you were to do a multiple choice question, okay, make sure you read each of the answers carefully, because usually what happens is sometimes they word it very similar concept, but one is wrong, right? Okay, so make sure you do that. Try to think of the answer even before you know the answer. So sometimes I would cover the answers, try to answer the question without looking at the answers, right? And then when you start reading the answers, you kind of connect that with your knowledge, right? Okay. Skip questions if you don't know. Come back to it again. Okay? Make sure you come back to it as well, right? Don't rely on patterns, right? Okay. So a teacher might use A for the first answer, A for the second question, and then maybe A for the third question. Don't assume that the teacher is going to do A again, or maybe C or something else, because there's some kind of pattern, right? Now, when we write exams, we have a random generator. That random generator mix all the answers up, so it's random. So sometimes it's A, sometimes B. So make sure you answer the questions. That's correct. Okay. If you don't know the answer, try to narrow it down. Okay. Now, some teachers will do 4 options. I like to do 5 options. So if you guys realize 5 options, it's 20% that you might get it right, right? But if you know that 3 of them are wrong, and 2 of them possibly could be right, you have 50% of getting it right, right? And so let's say you guess then, and you might be right there, right? So you increase your chances that way, right? Underline familiar words. Sometimes you underline those words and it kind of triggers your memory, right? That's sometimes important, okay? Now, I'm not going to say much about this more, but if you guys are interested in University of Toronto, they look at 10 different types of multiple choice questions. Okay, so you guys are probably familiar with the simplest form of it, called a list kind of multiple choice questions, where there's a question and there's a list, and you have to pick from that list for the correct one, right? Some of the more advanced questions require that you put your brain together and analyze each answer to get the right answer, right? So there's what we call higher order kind of questions. So if you guys are interested, go to the website and look at some of the examples, right? Okay. Now let's move on to short answer questions. Okay. So sometimes we have these so that we, as teachers, we like to see if we can put things together in a little essay or something, or a little short answer. One way of doing this is actually when you're studying, to ask yourself questions. I think my teacher is going to ask this question. Okay, so write down that question. Test yourself. So prepare for that, right? And make sure you answer every question. Even if you don't know the full answer, again, you might get partial credit, right? Again, start with the easier questions and then go back to the harder ones. And sometimes when you answer those easy questions, it provides a little bit of context for the harder questions. So you can go back to it and say, yeah, I remember that question in the previous page. Now read every word of the question carefully. A lot of times students get the answer wrong. It's when they don't understand the question and they don't read it carefully. Okay? Again, better to be concise than to be too flowery. If you're English, maybe you like to do that. But in science, we like to be concise, get to the point, and that will save you time to read the okay? Now, finally, is the last one is the essay question. So these are the long 1-pager, 2-pager, stuff like that. And this again goes back to your studying, right? When you're studying, try to make questions, big questions, right? That you think that the teacher is going to ask, right? So I often ask processes as a question, right? Describe DNA replication, okay? And it's a one-page kind of thing, right? So you can ask questions when you study, right? If you need help, do the outline first, right? And then basically use those words in the outline to start with paragraphs maybe, or key facts, right? And make sure you tie all those facts together. By using a summary sentence at the end, for example. A lot of times, pacing yourself, writing answer questions is important. Again, it's better to be concise because the teacher doesn't want to read a lot of things that are not related to the answer, right? Okay. Okay, now, before turning in the test, make sure you check your work one more time. Make sure all answers are answered, okay? If you have a problem with one of the multiple choice, make sure you correct that. Depending on how much time, this double check means 5 minutes, sometimes it's half an hour. But make sure you spend time doing this. And a lot of times, students that come from a small school, they forget to write a name at the top. Make sure you do that, right? Makes it over more. Okay, any questions so far? Good? Okay, now you guys all know this, right? Think positively, okay? Don't think negatively before a test because you know it's going to hurt you. Affirm yourself, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, just like the little Thomas train. I think I can, right? Things like that. I am smart, I'm capable, say that to yourself many times. Even after you complete the test, don't worry. You have done better than you found, right? I've talked to some students where after the test, how did you do? Oh, I did terrible. And then you grade the exam, they get like 90%, right? So they actually did better than that. If you did well, that's great. If you don't do that well, then consider it as a learning opportunity and think about what you do differently next time. Okay, so all mistakes can be corrected. Okay, so you're going to correct that in the future. Okay, so one of the problems with testing is anxiety. Okay, so everyone has anxiety, right? Every student is nervous before a test, especially if the exam is a major one, right? If the exam is 40%, you get more nervous, right? Okay. Now, basically, most people are nervous at different levels. Some people will be so nervous that they will throw up. Others, just maybe a little queasy or maybe a little headache or something like that. But hopefully you are on the mild side, right? And again, preparation, the more preparation you have, the less anxious you're going to be, okay? Now, test anxiety is actually a form of performance anxiety, right? You guys are familiar with people that do sports, right? Sometimes they won't jump as high because they have anxiety, right? But testing is kind of the same thing because it involves mental, physical, and emotional kind of symptoms, right? And those usually experienced right at the exam day, right? Now, if you have a little nervousness, that's okay. In fact, sometimes you need to have a little bit of adrenaline in your system to do well, right? You agree? In biochemistry, you talk about cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It's often released under situations of stress, right? And that's actually used to help you get through those situations, right? So sometimes a little bit of nerves is okay, but not too much, right? And everyone that takes a test has some form of nervousness, but for some people it is really bad. That has symptoms that interfere with the ability to take that test. Okay, so if you are under those situations where it's really bad, with bad anxiety, I hear a lot of times people say, my mind went blank, right? That's severe, right? Or feeling faint, fast, shallow breathing, you know, just that really bad. You know? Take a little break and kind of recover a little bit. Or seek help. Okay, so preparing yourself, one way is to study, right? Study a lot, prepare yourself as much as possible. All the tips, stay healthy, focus on positive thoughts, take time for self-care, all those things. Meditate, listen to calming music. Some of you listen to jazz, which is fine. Some people listen to rock and roll, that works too. Hip hop or whatever works for you, right? And arrive early, and those things will cut down the stress, right? Okay, now realize that one test will not ruin your life. Okay. A lot of kids say, "Oh, I'm not going to go to med school now because I failed this big test." Okay? You can always recover. Okay, you can always repeat that test later on. If you need to repeat the class, maybe that's another thing. But it's not going to ruin you, right? You're going to learn from that. If you need to seek professional help, do it. Okay. We have counselors on campus. Who do you go to get help? The professor. That's the first person that you should go, right? He's the one that's the expert in the area, right? So talk to your professor and says, I don't really understand this concept. Please explain that to me. Right? Okay? One of the advantages of being in a small school is you get to know your professors well. You come into the office and discuss things and stuff like that. So seek your professor. If you don't like your professor, maybe find another professor or a tutor, or even you need a counselor, the college center to set you up. Or if you don't like any of these people, you can talk to your friends, your parents, peer group about the fears and anxiety. Right? Okay, so we are almost done. Actually, we're going to be done early a little bit. Maybe I should have slowed down a little bit. If all fails, remember that text I gave you in the beginning? Yeah. Seek help in the book, right? I've oftentimes seen my students when they're doing a test, they just close their eyes and pray, and the next thing is they get that relief. So, that's a lot. Okay, so let's finish here. Any questions? Yeah.
You're going to 50, right?